Remember that the sight of flashing lights in your rearview mirror can trigger an immediate, involuntary physical response that often bypasses the logical mind. As the calendar turns toward the end of April and we begin to see the true transition into spring, more drivers are hitting the road to enjoy the warmer weather and the blooming scenery, which naturally leads to an increased traffic enforcement presence. When those lights appear behind you, your heart rate may spike, your palms might grow damp, and a sense of sudden urgency can cloud your judgment. This reaction is perfectly normal, but it is also the first hurdle you must overcome to ensure the encounter remains professional and predictable. Taking a deep breath and focusing on the physical mechanics of pulling over, finding a safe spot, signaling early, and coming to a gradual stop allows your nervous system to reset from a state of panic to one of focused observation. This time of year often brings unpredictable spring showers that can make road shoulders soft or slick. So your first priority is always safety, both for yourself and the officer who will be approaching your vehicle on foot. By choosing a well-lit, stable area to pull over, you are already demonstrating a level of calm and consideration that sets the tone for everything that follows in the minutes ahead. The psychological weight of a traffic stop is often more taxing than the administrative reality of the situation itself. It is essential to recognize that while the officer has a job to do, you also have a role to play in managing your own conduct and protecting your mental clarity. As the days grow longer and the evening light lingers well into the dinner hour, the visibility during these stops might be better, but the internal pressure to explain yourself can still be overwhelming. You might feel a desperate need to fill the silence or offer justifications before a single question has even been asked. However, thinking clearly requires you to resist that urge and instead focus on the immediate physical environment. Turn off the engine, roll down your window just enough to communicate, and keep your hands visible on the steering wheel. These small, deliberate actions provide you with a sense of control over your own space and signal to the officer that you are not a threat. By slowing down the pace of the interaction in your own mind, you create the necessary room to process information and respond thoughtfully rather than reacting out of fear or frustration. Understanding the nature of a typical stop involves recognizing that it is essentially a data-gathering exercise for the officer. They are looking for specific indicators, and your goal is to provide a standard, unremarkable experience. As the spring season brings more families out for weekend trips and local festivals, officers are often looking for routine compliance with traffic signals and speed limits. When you are sitting in your car waiting for the officer to approach, use those few seconds to remind yourself of your high-level rights and the importance of remaining composed. This is not the time for debate or legal theorizing. It is the time for establishing a baseline of mutual respect and safety. You are a citizen engaging in a regulated activity on a public roadway, and your primary objective is to conclude the encounter as efficiently as possible. By staying grounded in the present moment and acknowledging that your nervousness is just a temporary physiological state, you can maintain the poise required to navigate the complexities of the law and the specific procedures that are about to unfold at your driver's side window. This mental preparation is the foundation upon which your legal protections are built, ensuring that you do not inadvertently waive your rights or escalate a situation simply because your nervous system was in the driver's seat instead of your rational mind. Once the officer has reached your window and the initial contact is established, the interaction moves into the phase of administrative documentation. This is where your physical demeanor and the way you communicate your intentions play a pivotal role in de-escalating the situation. Most jurisdictions require you to provide your driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance upon a lawful request during a traffic stop. While you have the right to remain silent regarding investigative questions, you generally have a legal obligation to provide these identifying documents. To maintain a safe and professional environment, It is highly effective to keep your hands clearly visible on the steering wheel until the officer asks for your paperwork. When the request is made, do not dive suddenly into your glove compartment or center console. Instead, state clearly what you are doing before you move. You might say, "Officer, my registration is in the glove box. I am going to reach for it now." This simple act of verbalizing your movements removes the element of surprise and demonstrates that you are being cooperative and transparent about your physical actions. It signals to the officer that you are not a threat, which can significantly lower the tension of the encounter for everyone involved. The language you use at the window should be polite, respectful, and economical. Using titles like officer or deputy is not an admission of guilt or a sign of weakness. It is a professional courtesy that facilitates a smoother transaction. You can be firm in your rights while remaining courteous in your delivery. This balance is key to ensuring that the stop remains focused on the alleged traffic violation rather than becoming a conflict of personalities. As you hand over your documents, avoid the temptation to ask, "Why did you pull me over?" or to start explaining your side of the story immediately. In many cases, the officer will state the reason for the stop after they have secured your documents. By waiting for them to take the lead on the administrative side, you maintain your composure and avoid making statements that could later be used against you. Remember that anything you say can be recorded, so keeping your responses brief and focused on the immediate request for identification is the most strategic approach. The goal is to provide the necessary information required by law without volunteering additional details that are not legally mandated at this stage of the stop. Effective de-escalation also involves managing the physical space of your vehicle. While you might feel the urge to roll your window down just a tiny crack, doing so can sometimes increase an officer's suspicion or frustration, as it may appear you are hiding something. Conversely, rolling it down all the way can feel like an invasion of your private space. A common middle ground is to roll the window down far enough to communicate clearly and pass documents through without obstruction. If the stop occurs at night, turning on your interior dome light is a proactive way to show the officer that you have nothing to hide and that the interior of the vehicle is safe to approach. These small, nonverbal cues work together with your polite language to create a controlled environment. By focusing on the mechanical requirements of the stop, providing the ID and insurance, and doing so with calm, announced movements, you move the process along efficiently. This allows you to stay focused on the high-level legal concepts that will become relevant if the officer begins to transition from a routine traffic check into a broader investigation or a request for a search, which requires a different level of awareness and a specific set of responses. As the interaction progresses beyond the initial exchange of documents, the officer may shift from a routine traffic inquiry into what is known as investigative questioning. This is often a subtle transition where the questions become more personal or open-ended, such as asking where you are coming from, where you are headed, or what you have inside the vehicle. It is important to understand that in the vast majority of traffic stops, your legal obligation is to provide your identification and stay until the citation or warning is issued. But you are generally not required to answer these additional investigative questions. This is where the concept of the right to remain silent becomes a practical tool rather than just a high-level theory. While it might feel awkward or even rude to decline to answer, doing so is a fundamental way to protect your interests and limit the scope of the encounter. You can politely state that you are not discussing your day or that you prefer to remain silent. The officer is trained to use conversation to look for inconsistencies or signs of impairment. And while their intentions may be professional, any information you volunteer can expand the stop far beyond the original reason for the lights in your mirror. Staying focused on the traffic matter at hand helps ensure the stop concludes as quickly as possible without turning into a broader probe into your private life. A critical point in many roadside encounters occurs when an officer asks for permission to search your vehicle. This is often phrased as a casual request such as, "You don't mind if I take a quick look inside, do you?" Or, "Since you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem if I check the trunk." It is vital to recognize that this is a request for consent, and you have the absolute right to refuse it. One of the most powerful phrases you can use in this moment consists of exactly 7 words. I do not consent to any searches. By clearly and calmly uttering this sentence, you are asserting a constitutional protection that exists to prevent arbitrary government intrusion into your private property. Refusing a search is not an admission of guilt, and it should not be treated as such by the legal system. Even if the officer believes they have another legal basis to search the car regardless of your answer, stating your lack of consent for the record is essential for any future legal challenges your attorney might need to make. Without a clear statement that you do not consent, it can be argued later that the search was voluntary, which can waive many of the protections you would otherwise have. Laws regarding when an officer can search without consent vary significantly by state and situation, but your refusal provides a consistent baseline for your defense, regardless of where you are driving. While you have the right to refuse a search, you must also be aware of the plain view doctrine and how it interacts with your privacy. If an officer sees something illegal or suspicious in plain sight from their position outside the vehicle, such as an open container, certain types of equipment, or evidence of a crime, they may have the legal justification to search without your permission. This is why keeping a clean and organized vehicle is not just a matter of habit, but a way to minimize unnecessary complications during a stop. Additionally, the standards for what constitutes probable cause can differ depending on your jurisdiction. In some states, the mere smell of a particular substance might be enough for an officer to legally search a vehicle, while in others, the law has evolved to require more specific evidence of a current violation. Because these legal standards are constantly shifting and depend heavily on local court rulings and state statutes, you should never assume that the rules in one part of the country apply exactly the same way in another. Your primary job is to remain calm, refuse consent for any searches politely but clearly, and avoid interfering if the officer decides to proceed anyway. By understanding these high-level concepts of consent and plain view, you can navigate the most sensitive part of a traffic stop with the confidence that you are upholding your rights while maintaining the safety and decorum of the encounter. There may come a moment in a traffic stop where the atmosphere shifts from a routine administrative check to something more pressured or confrontational. This is often referred to as the escalation edge, a point where the officer's questions become more aggressive, repetitive, or accusatory. It is during these high-tension minutes that your commitment to staying calm is tested most severely. When you feel the situation moving in this direction, it is vital to remember that you have the right to stop the conversation. Silence in this context is not an act of defiance or an admission of wrongdoing. It is a constitutional boundary that you are entitled to set. If the questioning moves beyond the simple exchange of documents and becomes an interrogation regarding your activities, your belongings, or your past, you can firmly and politely state that you are choosing to exercise your right to remain silent and that you will not answer any further questions without an attorney present. This invocation of the right to counsel is a fundamental legal principle designed to protect individuals from self-incrimination and to ensure that any significant legal discussion happens in a controlled environment with professional guidance. By making this statement, you are essentially hitting a procedural pause button, signaling that you recognize the gravity of the encounter and wish to rely on established legal safeguards rather than engaging in a roadside debate that you are unlikely to win. Staying safe during an escalated encounter requires a disciplined focus on physical compliance and factual communication. Even if you believe the officer is acting unfairly, making a mistake, or exceeding their legal authority, the roadside is not the venue to litigate the matter. Attempting to argue the law or physically resisting an officer's commands will almost always worsen the situation and could lead to additional charges or physical harm. If you are ordered to step out of the vehicle, you should do so slowly and keep your hands where they can be seen at all times. You can maintain your legal position while complying with the physical order by saying, "I am exiting the vehicle because you have ordered me to do so, but I do not consent to any searches and I am maintaining my right to remain silent." This approach keeps the physical interaction stable and predictable while creating a clear record that your actions were the result of a direct order rather than a voluntary waiver of your rights. Your primary objective at the escalation edge is to de-risk the environment. By remaining factual and avoiding emotional outbursts, you prevent the officer from having a justification to further escalate their use of force or investigative tactics based on perceived disorderly behavior. The concept of maintaining a factual mindset involves treating every second of the encounter as if it is being preserved for a future legal review. In the modern era, most traffic stops are recorded by body-worn cameras or dashboard units, and you may even be recording the interaction yourself. This means that your tone, your words, and your body language will all be scrutinized later by professionals who were not there in the heat of the moment. Responding to the escalation edge with professional detachment is your best defense. Instead of reacting to perceived slights or aggressive posturing with similar energy, remain the most composed person on the scene. If you feel that your rights are being significantly violated or that the officer's conduct is unprofessional, you can ask for a supervisor to come to the scene, but do so with the same level of calm you have maintained from the beginning. Navigating these edges is about understanding that the power of the law is not exercised through shouting or resistance, but through the quiet and steady assertion of your rights and the refusal to be baited into an emotional confrontation. By staying silent when necessary and requesting counsel when the investigation deepens, you are acting as your own first line of defense, ensuring that the final outcome of the stop is determined by the facts of the law in a courtroom rather than the intensity of an argument on the side of the highway. Once the officer has returned to their vehicle and you have been cleared to leave, the encounter has transitioned from a physical interaction to a legal record. The minutes immediately following the stop are the most valuable for ensuring that record is accurate. Before the details begin to fade or the stress of the day reshapes your memory, pull over to a secure location and begin documenting the specifics. Write down the officer's name, their badge number, and the number on the patrol car if you were able to observe it. Record the exact time the stop occurred, the precise location, and the weather conditions. As we move through the end of April and into the variable conditions of spring, noting things like the position of the sun, the presence of shadows, or the wetness of the pavement can be more than just trivia. These factors can play a significant role in how a traffic violation is perceived by a court. List the sequence of the conversation as you remember it, focusing specifically on what the officer asked and how you responded. Did you clearly state that you did not consent to a search? Did you inform the officer you were exercising your right to remain silent? Having these details written down contemporaneously provides a factual anchor that is far more reliable than a memory recalled weeks or months later during a hearing. Adopting a documentation mindset means treating your record as a professional log of a government interaction. This log is not a place for venting frustration, but for cold, hard facts. Note any witnesses who may have been present, the presence of any recording devices like dash cams or body cameras you observed, and the specific reason the officer gave for the stop. This information is the raw material that a qualified legal professional will use to evaluate the legality of the encounter. If you believe your rights were infringed upon, this documentation is your primary evidence. You should take this information to a qualified attorney who is licensed to practice in your specific jurisdiction and who specializes in traffic or criminal law. Every state has its own set of statutes and local court precedents that dictate how the law is applied on its roads. For example, some states have very specific rules about how long a traffic stop can last before it becomes an unlawful detention, while others may have different standards for what constitutes a valid reason for a vehicle search. A local attorney is the only person who can provide you with the nuanced, situation-specific guidance required to navigate the legal system effectively and protect your driving record and your rights. It is vital to state clearly that the information provided throughout this discussion is intended for general educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Engaging with this content does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and the creator. The legal landscape is complex and constantly evolving, with laws varying significantly from state to state and even between different local municipalities. What constitutes a lawful procedure in one area may not hold true in another, and the high-level rights concepts discussed here should be seen as a general guide rather than a substitute for professional legal counsel. You are strongly encouraged to verify the specific traffic laws and constitutional interpretations in your own state, and to consult with a licensed attorney for any legal matters. This information is meant to empower you with a better understanding of how to remain calm and professional during a traffic stop, but it cannot account for the specific facts of your individual case or the current standing of the law in your area. By prioritizing accurate documentation and seeking out expert local advice, you are taking the most responsible steps possible to protect your interests and uphold the integrity of the legal process in a manner that is safe, factual, and legally sound.